Unfiltered, uncensored, and unapologetic. This is the Retail Warzone podcast.
Everybody welcome Andy Greskoviak. God, I knew I was going to blow it.
No, you did great. Greskoviak.
But this gentleman, provided the industry with a great present as far as I'm concerned. So we're going to have him tell us a little bit about himself. We've got some questions. He's worked retail, so we'll be talking about those experiences. Going to be a fun night. If you guys have questions and whatnot, hit them up in the chat. And without any further ado, Andy, tell us a little bit about yourself, sir.
Right on. Thank you so much for having me. First and foremost, it's very, very exciting. As you were saying, I wrote a movie called Black Friday that premiered in limited theaters, but on streaming over the holiday season, and now is on most VOD platforms, DVD. But before that, leading up to it, I worked retail, right? And it's a movie about retail and retail workers and sort of the plights they faced regularly, and then sort of supernatural threats as well. But yeah, before we made that movie, I worked retail we were just talking about it, for like 9 years. I worked in different service industry jobs, so I know it well. And all the stuff in the movie was pulled from super personal experiences, relationships I had in the workplace, encounters I had with customers. I just dropped something. I'm sorry. So that's, I come from the Midwest. I'm from Illinois. I was born in Chicago, so technically I'm from Chicago, but raised in a suburb. Went to DePaul for film school and moved out to California to pursue the dream, right? To make movies. But the whole time, the whole through line through this entire experience was retail. So the entire journey until I was actually making a movie, I have a retail job that corresponds with every step of the way. So that's a bit about me. I could share more. I can't share less, but I could share more if you.
Well, we obviously know you did the movie, but let's get into your retail background a little bit. So where did it all start?
Started when I was when I was in high school, I never worked like a real job. It was always my mom was a real estate agent, so I worked with her real estate office and would put those flyers on your mailbox. That was me, right, for a summer, and helped take care of my grandpa for a summer, which it's not a real job. And so then when I entered college and in the summers between, I started looking at retail jobs because I thought it was specifically at Toys R Us. That was the job I wanted during summers because I felt like I was this is great. It's a fun place. I'm gonna work a fun job during the summer. And so I applied at Toys R Us, got that job, worked there for only 6 or 7 months. Quit because I was doing the commute. So I was going to school in the city and working at Toys R Us Friday through Sunday night. And so or Thursday night through Sunday. And so that was kind of that. I quit just because the commute was weird. Then I would work intermittently between Bath and Body Works and a store called Things Remembered, which was a personalized engraving store in our local mall, Stratford Square Mall in Bloomingdale, Illinois. And they were in the same mall. So I would work at both of those places for a couple years throughout the rest of college. Left college, went to work at a men's retailer called Bonobos. So that's an online retailer, but they have storefronts. And then they got bought by Walmart. So I worked for the big one for a little bit, and then finished up at a place at a small boutique furniture store that I was fired from. And then I worked Instacart, which isn't retail, but that's the service industry. And then made a movie. So that's my timeline. So I never really chose a retail lane. I just worked in stores.
Somebody in the comments said, "Oh my God, I know Stratford. I lived in Naperville."
No way. That's awesome. So probably 2 or 3 better malls, and then Stratford, which I love. Stratford, but that's another thing. I think there was always I think I've always tried to beat the system with my jobs. And so I was always trying to find the place that was like fun or maybe gave me that nostalgia kick. And so even that, where it's like, I worked at Stratford Square Mall. It was not in its heyday. It was like far past its prime, but there was the part of me that was like, oh no, this was a fun place I would go to and like have a blast when I was a tween or whatever. And so I worked there because I thought maybe it could be fun. It never was. They always got me.
Well, Blaine Tag asked, as fun as you thought it would be. And that kind of goes to like one of the scenes in the movie, where your character's talking about the dream of working at the place that your parents dropped you off or took you to as a child, referring to a toy store. So would that be accurate as to how you felt about working at toys?
Oh man, that entire monologue from Chris. So Chris is a parable for me, just in that neurotic, germaphobe retail employee, and that whole monologue he has that's from my life. Except it wasn't my dad. My dad wasn't like, welcome to corporate hell, but people were, and it was it. I remember thinking when I got the job at Toys R Us, this is not hyperbole or a joke, but when I got interviewed at Toys R Us, they gave you a box of Legos. And they were like, build whatever you can imagine, pass your creation to the left, and sell me what the person next, because it was a group interview, what the person next to you has passed you. And so then I get the job, and I go home, and I remember even being like, no, the interview was like pretty lighthearted and silly. Like, I think I got a fun job. I think this is going to be really fun. Like I said, in my mind, it was the place that when you were a kid, you would beg your parents, like, could we please go to Toys R Us and just like meander through the aisles and just look at toys we don't have. And so I thought, like, here we go. This is going to be great. And it was really brutal. It was really, really tough.
I will say this. I've got to mention this to everybody that's watching. So, they gave you Legos. As far as I'm concerned, anybody who goes to work in retail, they need to have some time with Legos so they can at least learn how to stack.
Seriously, there's a lot of practical uses in the Lego world, but I was so confused when I was like selling this birthday cake somebody built, and I was like, it's great, it's yellow, you're gonna love it, and I thought the job would be a lot like that. It's naive. It was my first job, but it was. They definitely, before I clocked in for the first time, they weren't saying it's not like this. You know what I mean? So. It was.
So did you work through a Christmas there?
Mm-hmm. I did.
Ooh.
Well, even worse. I quit the week of Christmas. So I worked through the holiday season and through Black Friday, which was bad. And then I worked through Christmas, and they asked us all to put in our days request off for the week of Christmas. And Christmas time, at the time, as you got closer to the holiday, Toys R Us would stay open longer and longer until the week of Christmas. It was never closed.
That's right. I remember those days. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, and it's so parents can shop whenever their kids are finally asleep, and I get it. But they came to us and asked, like, okay, what time would you like off, or what days would you like off for the week of Christmas? And I remember putting in specific days, and I can't remember. I do think one was pretty coveted. But like swinging for the fences, going like, can I get Christmas Eve off? I'll work Christmas Day. And somebody coming to me and saying, you're actually going to work Christmas Eve for having the audacity to ask. And I was like, weird. And it was right at the time where I was kind of like, the commute's already killing me because I was primarily living downtown for school. And so that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. But really, it's Thanksgiving and the 2 weeks following that are the shit show. And I was there. It was wild. I would go in some days at like 5 a.m. to just make shipments and just packing boxes of toys to send out to people. I felt like an elf. I felt like I was one of Santa's elves, and it was wild. It was exhausting and draining. And I just remember me and a lot of other people, and it's weird saying this now on this side of the movie and this side of a global pandemic. I already got sicker than I ever got working that schedule, and it chewed me up and spit me out, and a lot of people on that job would just get exhausted or sick, and you just kept going. You just kept working, and like I said, it was pretty discouraging, but also, you fall into a routine where you're doing it. You're going through the motions. And it was an impersonal job. In that,
I got a fun question for you. A hero asked, do you recall what the toy was to get the year that you left?
Totally. Two things, because I had people screaming at me. So one, there's a toy called Skylanders.
Yes.
That was like, it was like a toy. You would put it on a platform, and that toy you could play it on your PlayStation or Xbox or whatever. So that was huge. And the other one was there was a new version of Tickle Me Elmo. So this was 2011. So it was something that had to do with like an MP3 player. I don't know if it was Bluetooth or if you could plug it in or something, but it was like a new and updated Tickle Me Elmo that I remember we kept making the joke, like, this is still, I think Ken Bates, who is the main, that's Devin's character in the movie. That's my actual buddy that worked at Toys R Us with me. So me and Ken would hang out and just make fun of how, like, this was still a craze. Like, people were still losing their minds over Tickle Me Elmo. Specifically, I just told this story on another show, but specifically, I had a guy come in and ask for one of those Elmo toys, and I said, yeah, we don't have them. And really seriously, he was like, can't you just go in the back and build one for me? And I was like, what do you think we do here? Like, that we're just like in the back with hammers assembling toys. But those were the two I remember people losing their minds off of. And then Apple products, because they partnered with Apple. And so I remember on Black Friday, we got like 5 or 6 iPods and like 4 or 5 iPads, and people that's such an irresponsible number.
Yeah, that's terrible.
People lost their minds. And they all felt entitled to those Apple products. So those were the big ticket items that year. It was weird because it was at a point in the store's trajectory where it almost got to a point where, like, we would get surprised if somebody left the store with a bike or the classic fun toy, because it was all tablets and little, video games and stuff.
Wow. All right. So we got some questions that have come through. Hybrid Hooligan asked, did Kevin Smith's Clerks influence your decision to write Black Friday?
Oh, man. Okay. Sorry. If I'm talking too much, please let me know. Because I
right ahead, sir.
Love to talk. Kevin Smith was such an inspiration in two ways. One, obviously shining a light on people in the service industry, right? I recently said that, like, especially working retail, you watch Clerks and I would watch Waiting, the Ryan Reynolds movie, and as a retail employee, you're kind of like, where's ours, right? So that was a huge thing, just people going through their workday and sort of like actively hating it while still working it. Like, just seeing that as a movie was huge for me. And just from like the screenwriting principle of going with what you know, and that's a guy who knew a convenience store in New Jersey and wrote a movie about it. And just that, I pitched this script when I was in college because of that principle. What do you know? What could I write about? And at the time I was like, I know a shit ton about the ins and outs of a big box toy store. So there was that. And there was also his movie Tusk. He made a movie called Tusk in 2014, was hugely influential in just the monster style. Actually, Bob Kurtzman, who made the walrus monster in Tusk, came on to make our creatures, and because it just really helped solidify this love for practical creature effects this side of 2010. Right?
Yeah.
You don't see it a lot. It's a lot of CGI. So, yeah, Kevin Smith, hugely, hugely inspirational.
Another question, if I can find it here. Irish Connection asks, what movie or TV show depicts retail most accurately other than your movie that you're aware of?
Big fan of Superstore. Always a huge fan of Superstore because I think it really shines a light on because I always had such a soft spot for working retail, even though I would come to resent a lot of retailers. And that's, a lot of it is, and what they depict in Superstore is those, like, relationships, the people you meet, the friends you meet. I know the feeling of clocking in and going, oh, Ken's working today. Nice, right? Like, it's maybe not going to be the easiest day, but it's going to be a fun day. Like, there will be fun parts. And so I always thought Superstore did a good job of establishing that camaraderie that I would feel. And maybe make it, showing that like a shitty work day could be made a little bit nicer with some friends and with some good people around.
Yep. Doodle Piz asks, have you had any backlash from retailers or corporate America over the movie?
No, none. I think if anyone did take issue with it, I'd be happy to talk to them about it. I've always thought the concept, I've worked a lot of Black Fridays. I've always thought the concept of it is disgusting. And it's just, it keeps getting longer and longer. I mean, the schedule they work in my movie was the schedule I worked. And so you say goodbye to your parents. You say goodbye to your family on Thanksgiving because it's like, oh, I got to go work all night. And then the rest of the weekend, you're either working or sleeping, and it's a huge bummer. And so that I might have forgotten the question because I've just been rambling so much. But about corporations content. No. And if anybody did, I'd be happy to have that conversation because I still take a pretty great issue with Black Friday and these made up retail holidays that are just, it's nothing to a consumer and it's living hell for an employee.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So this is going to be a two-parter. The one question is going to kind of piggyback to the other. Blame Tag says, I want to know how the hell you landed this Dreamcast.
Somebody, it must have been me or the director, Casey, must have wished on a shooting star or something because we'd get these lists of names from our casting director, and they'd say, well, who would you think, right? And it's kind of a tough thing because you got to think, well, who fits the voice of a character and who could we kind of help fit the voice of a character? And so then the list started getting shorter and shorter until it was like, well, what do you think about Bruce Campbell? And I said, wow, I mean, yeah, that'd be great. Okay, let's make a list of 10 Bruce Campbell types and we'll try. And it was, then our producer was like, no, he's in. He wants to do it. I think a lot of it is a story. People like to get behind a story that needs to be told. I'm not patting myself on the back at all. I'm just saying that the story of retail employees, I think it especially, given the time it was shot, we shot in November to just before Christmas 2020. And so I think it was a story that a lot of the cast responded to as far as, we were in a time when it was we're all in our homes avoiding a pandemic except for, service workers and essential workers, right? And so I think it was a story a lot of people connected with. And I think it was, it was a fun environment to play in for a couple months, right? It was a good time. It was a really silly time. So I don't know why everyone agreed to be in the movie. I'm eternally grateful to all of them. Everyone was so gracious with their time and energy, and everyone was wonderful. I'm surprised as well.
This is the second one. This is Proto Rage saying, I have to ask, movie-wise, did you have a geek out moment having Bruce Campbell in the movie, especially with his big claim being Evil Dead and been a character employee of S-Mart? Yeah,
it was. Absolutely. The first time I met him it was just, not necessarily starstruck, but more just sort of I can't imagine you will want to talk to me. It was really exciting though, because one, he was able, I again mentioned this on another show, he'll always bring you back down to earth, because if you complain about anything, he'll talk about working on Evil Dead with a crew of 4 people or whatever. And so you can't complain about anything. But also really, really dug the script for what it was and what it was doing and saying, and liked the characters. Any time we would bring up Evil Dead or anything and say oh, do you see similarities? Do you think? He was always drawing that line in the sand going nope, this is a separate character. This is a whole separate thing, right? This isn't an Evil Dead movie. And he would always say, more than anything, I see it as a Breakfast Club movie. He said, he's that's why he loved it. That's why he loved, he came on board. He was it's a character movie. It's a movie where we get to see people connecting and fighting monsters. But he was you're never rooting for heroes who have nothing going on, right? Who you aren't compelled to root for, who aren't going to survive, who you don't care to survive a story, right? And so he always thought that the characters were something to kind of grab onto and fun to explore. So that was, I was excited to meet him and also very humbled because he was just a cool, regular guy.
I mean, it's Bruce
Anytime
Campbell. I mean, it's just like, whoa.
Anytime he passed it. So I was really, really tight with Ryan Lee and Stephen Peck and Ivana Beccaro on set. And anytime he would be like near us and we were having a conversation, he would chime in and he would have thoughts or whatever. And we were always, I think, very stunned. Like, why? You care about what we're talking about? Because it would always be insane. You know, it would always be something so silly. But I guess it was that. I was more really impressed with how just real and cool he was.
But, you know, having that name attached had to help with the draw.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he's got a certain stamp of approval, right? I don't know that Bruce has been in anything that isn't exciting. And so it's like getting him on board. And what's really fun is, obviously, especially having the movie be the genre it is, a lot of people bring up Evil Dead. But I've had so many people who have connected with him in different projects that it's great. I think he's a part of everyone's cinematic life in one way or another. I mean, so I've had people mentioning Sky High, which came out when I was in 8th grade, right? And it's like, yeah, no, and if he will talk to you about it, he'll talk to you about the Spider-Man movies, or, you know, it's cool to have someone who's such a seasoned vet in the movie, and to a seasoned vet in the genre put their stamp of approval on it. It meant it.
Comment just came through. Hero 130 says, quote unquote, they're never really dead.
Oh man, he was so on board to be silly. The first draft, Jonathan's pretty much just the heel. The boss is just, he's the bad guy, right? He's the one who's kind of like, hey, we should all, keep on keeping on, right? Let's go back on the sales floor. But when Bruce came on, he added such a weird energy to it that we actually kind of tried to give him a redemption arc. But in doing that, he also is kind of this weird Greek chorus commenting on the mythos of these monsters the whole time. Because he can juggle it, I think, so well. We could give him like, oh, be funny, be heartwarming, be kind of evil, and also thread this needle about the mythos of these monsters, and he could do it all. So it was...
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, it was just that. It was impressive to see, but it's like once he came on board, we're like, oh, let's beef up this character, not just to get him in the movie more, but it's like, oh, I think he could do this.
Yeah. To your point about, threading the needle or whatnot, and the redemption arc, Proto Rage says, I admit at first his character was definitely one that you didn't want to like, but then his character growth to wanting to be accepted and be a good leader.
Yeah, I think, everyone, and there's this scene, thank you for watching, by the way, commenter. But I think everyone ends up in retail for a different reason. I tried to convey it in this scene where they're all sitting in the warehouse. And I think deep down, we're all human, right? And we'll all have different commitment levels to any given profession. And I have an undying respect for people in the service industry, right? It's just, it comes with the territory. And so I got to a point where I thought, Jonathan isn't purely evil. It just takes him a little bit longer to come around on the survival of the group over the survival of a store. And when you're in a management position, when you're in, I think you drink way more of the Kool-Aid. So you're the guy who's going like, no, we got to stay open longer than anybody else. But I wanted to show him eventually come around and eventually find what he was looking for.
Well, what was done, and I think it was amazing, if you've worked in the business, is the age difference between Jonathan, obviously, and the staff. When you look at that just visually, that's kind of the attitude you would expect the old salty manager to have.
Yes. Again, pulled from experience. I had a manager who was a bit older in one of my retail jobs who was kind of like that and kind of he felt powerful in the store, like it was his domain, and it was the place he got to be in charge and be the top dog. And it's like, I think it's only human to let that power get to your head. I don't necessarily blame anyone for that, but it's like, I hope something brings you down to earth, whether it's a monster attack or just a good talking to, and I like him being a lot older than the staff because it creates, except for we have Ruth, who's a bit older, but it creates a disconnect, I think.
Well, I think you did. I think you portrayed that correctly.
Yeah.
I mean, you wrote that perfectly. And Hybrid just chimed in, Brian was 100% the villain.
Yes, I've worked with many Brians. Stephen was great. Stephen Peck plays the character Brian and brought and they've never worked retail, but they've worked in other service industry roles, and just brought this like snide cruelty to the character that was so real, and it was so fun to see, because I think everyone's worked with somebody like Brian. Everyone's worked with someone where it's just like, you just get under my skin in such a specific way. And, you know, this is I guess a spoiler, or a thing is, the story I wanted to tell, the people who perish, who die in Black Friday, were, to me, the people who were going to stay at We Love Toys forever. And the people who get out are the ones who would eventually have gone on to find another job. And that's not a bad thing. It's not, if you stay at a job and work your way up the ladder, that's great. And so I think people that are ostensibly good and bad die as employees of We Love Toys. But I always just looked at it as, who would stick around? Who would stay in this gig for a bit longer? And I think Brian is somebody who, the customers would be the death of him, and he would definitely suck up and pander until he was the manager, or, you know, a regional manager.
I'm sorry, the scene with Brian trying to talk to your monster and getting flicked like a paper football was hilarious.
It was great. I always pictured it way more shouty, but Steven played it so just like he was actually trying to have a conversation with this creature, and it was so funny. It came out perfectly.
All right, so let's get into a little of the Hollywood stuff. So you had told me off stream, you had been writing this for about 10 years, right?
Yes.
So kind of walk us through this. We're going to get into some uncharted territory here, because I'm sure a lot of us are curious how this works. So walk us through pitching it, who optioned it, and like from the time somebody optioned it, how long it came to fruition.
Okay, awesome. So like you said, wrote it for like 10 years. It started out as a script in college, and the two main characters were both 20-something guys who were like, work sucks. And then, you know, I would edit it and revise it, but over time really came to think like, oh, what if Ken is like a bit older, right? What if they're not in their 20s? Oh, what if he kind of likes it here? What if he's like the coolest guy at the store? So that was the big development, and kept changing kind of what the monsters were, and went through a couple bouts of people being interested, which is like a devastating holding pattern to be in, because it's just basically like people circling the script going, we're reading it, we like it, we might do something about it, so don't be sending it out. And so that happened a couple times to me. And then when I was at my final retail job, met Casey online. Casey's the director of the movie, and he's also made some wonderful documentaries about Aerosmith and Steven Tyler. And he had another feature, a narrative feature called Happy Birthday, that came out in 2016. And there was this website where you could pitch to people, to creatives and managers and agents. And I found Casey on it, pitched him this idea. He responded and was like, send me the script. And I sent him the script, and then he emailed me and said, send me your number. And I sent him my number, and he texted me. He was like, I think we could do this. I think we can make this movie. And Casey, his movie Happy Birthday, he had packaged it with Gersh, this agency. So he's like, I think we could take it there and see what they could do with it. Went in, pitched it. They really dug the idea. That was January 5th, 2020. Wow. So then the world shuts down shortly after. Yeah, so we do like the first initial meeting, January 5th. I take another, and it was just a shocking juxtaposition, because I take my second meeting and it's like a completely vacant office compared to, I went in first and there's all these assistants and whatever, all this business going on. Second time I go in, empty office. The guy I'm meeting with is like, I think COVID's going to be pretty bad. The next week, the world shuts down. Which, I'd done this a couple times, right? So I had gone through like people are interested, we're in this holding pattern. So I was like, great, that was fun to do it again, and fell through, and that's cool. And Casey and I, we would kind of chop it up, and we'd see what was going on in the news, and we're like, it's still a really fun story to tell. Is it too close to home? We took out just anything. It never was a huge infection movie. I know, I think there's one guy who's like, I don't feel so good, but otherwise, it was never quite like that. And but we just wanted it to make people forget. Like, we didn't want to mention COVID or anything, and so we did a polish on the script, and then around May, because also, when the pandemic began, we were like, yeah, it'll be 2 weeks. Okay, it'll be a month. It'll be whatever. And so around May, we were like, okay, I think we're stuck in this for a minute. Let's send it out to people. Let's see who was interested, because Gersh was still all in, and they had this wonderful Rolodex of talent. And we sent it out to Devin Sawa. He was really into it, really excited to get back into the genre. And then then we brought on the producer, and then it all kind of fell into place. So it was like this thing that was given the green light before the pandemic, stalled, and then it really started to come together mostly in summer 2020. And so then, we brought on our producer, Warner, and we had this really wonderful casting director, Brandon Rodriguez, who it really felt like overnight brought in the cast. And then by October, I was in Rhode Island. We filmed it in a town called Attleboro, Massachusetts. And so we moved to Rhode Island for 2 months, my wife and I, to enter the production bubble. And we filmed it for 6 weeks. We were there for 2 months. And then we had a couple, because there was the holidays, and so there was time off. I think altogether it was like a 5-week shoot. And then came back and did post-production in LA, where we just sat and you just watch the movie. I think I've watched the movie 300 times.
What's
now.
a typical time frame on post? How long does that take?
So it's interesting, because this is my first feature film, and it took us about 6 months, 5 months. And I think that's pretty typical. Most of our CGI is it's patchwork, right? It's going like, oh, you could see something here, so let's color it out. So a more CGI heavy movie, definitely longer, but most of our stuff was just cleaning it up. So it was about 5 months, and that was all. That's editing the movie together, scoring it, doing ADR, where the actors get back in the studio to re-record lines or to add sound effects. So it was around August 1st, 2021, that I sat down and watched what everybody can watch.
Wow. So actually the post took longer than the actual filming. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And it's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So you're watching, everyone's watching the movie a 1,000 times, and we're compiling notes, and, I'm watching cuts of it and going like, oh, that line, maybe it's we could re-record it, or maybe this shot's a bit quick, and so you're taking then everyone's notes from like 10 different rounds of screenings and trying to apply them into a movie that everyone agrees on. And luckily, we were all really on the same page with what we wanted the movie to be. That was another thing. We are a smaller movie, and so we didn't have anybody, like any studio execs, breathing down our neck saying like, you got to change this. So we were all, that also helped.
Now, were you under a major studio umbrella, or was this totally independent?
Independent, and then we got bought by Screen Media. So they did some other. It's called Willy's Wonderland. It's a Nicolas Cage movie, and they've been wonderful. But yeah, we were on our own. Gersh was the big driving force behind it in terms of pulling in financing and bringing the movie to life. But yeah, we really had our own creative control, which was excellent, because there was a lot of other things we were trying to manage.
Right now, I'm not sitting here asking you to give dollar amounts, but I'm just curious how this works. I'm a musician, and I used to work with people in the music business, and I'm kind of trying to see if it's the same. So when it's optioned, are you getting like an upfront fee and that's it, or are you getting something on the back end as well?
Right on. So it's both, and it's all in like fine print in a contract. But yeah, so you get paid for the script, and then you get residuals based on how it performs.
Were you compensated on 2 roles, because weren't you like an executive producer as well?
Only on the one role. Executive producer more so was just I was on the ground floor. I was the first person to get the project. I wrote it, and was the first person kind of out there shopping it around, and then also was on set every day, just because, like I said, it was that production bubble where it was like we entered, and once we left, we couldn't come back. And so I ended up being on set and just like helping like every day. Like If somebody wanted a funny line, I'm writing it for them. If somebody had a question about delivery or whatever, because everything was so distant, right? So if Casey's talking to an actor about specific blocking in a scene, another actor can't necessarily come up and be like, hey, I got kind of silly semantic questions, because we're keeping everyone distant. We're trying to really be conscious about overcrowding and what particles are entering the air. So I was there, there's Ryan and I and Ivana and I would just sit and chop up the script and kind of discuss different, if a line wasn't working, how to deliver an alt. Or, even stuff just like the layout of the store sometimes would catch us by surprise, and I'd be on set rewriting a scene for the day where it's like, oh, we gotta. It's really weirdly hyper specific, but just scenes where it's like, oh, I wrote a scene where a ladder's outside of the store, but the ladder's inside the store. I have to write a completely different resolution to another scene. So these were the things happening day to day.
But you talk about your cast and the stars aligning. The fact that you were able to pull this off in 2020, man. I don't believe it. That's got to be historic.
I've got this, it's on my desk. I'm in my office right now. I've got this We Love Toys name tag on my desk. It says, it's an Andy name tag, and it says, I've loved toys since 2020 on the bottom. And it always blows my mind. It's such a weird thing to see that that anything came out of that year, that anything got done. And we had a crew of 80 plus people, like that just, we all, so on the second day of filming, we had a pretty big COVID scare. We were all getting tested so much, and a test didn't read. But the company that relayed this info back to us would say you either have tests that are completed or tests that are negative, or tests that are not negative. And so we didn't know what that meant, and so we had to shut down for one day of shooting, and it scared everyone so much because we wanted to get this movie done. That those next days of shooting, the following few weeks of shooting, we all took it super seriously, and everyone was really respectful of one another and what any department needed as far as, space or if necessary. I don't know the terms that different parts of the crew would use, but whatever people needed to get the job done in a safe but also efficient way. And everyone really hunkered down and made the movie together. It's why, one of the few things, and I would never I love this movie, but it's one of the reasons why it never really, this, in the original script, there's hordes and hordes of people in the store, right? It's massive. And because of COVID, we couldn't do that. It was impossible. And we always refused to make CGI crowds of people. So we have the wonderful actors who came and got in full monster makeup and acted as our monster shoppers. And I'm really, really grateful for them. But everyone really, really hunkered down for the production.
I did notice. So there was a logo revision, I believe, for the title, because it seems like there's. So how did that come about? Because I noticed that there was a logo revision, and then it had the tagline of "overworked, underpaid, and ready for the apocalypse."
I love that tagline too. That's so good. I like it. That's the UK one. The UK got the tagline, and they got the logo yellow and black. I don't know why we got the logo. Because I didn't get to meet with anyone on the poster or anything, but the font certainly looks kind of Evil Dead-y on the American poster, so I'm sure it had something to do with that. I'm sure it was it kind of, and the text is red. I think it obviously implies horror, but Christmas, and I just, I live in America, so I would imagine that's why. And then the UK one, I think it just probably corresponds with, I don't know if it corresponds to maybe a big box retailer or something over there.
The thing I noticed about that and what piqued my interest on it was the fact that, boy, if that doesn't go along with the retail issues right now, nothing does. It was like, okay, did whoever do this figure out, a way to kind of coordinate this with all the issues that we have in the industry? Because it's like, wow, that had to have some influence.
Right. I think so. I'd imagine so. And it was always, I always loved that idea. And early on was always something we tried to work in. If we didn't get any leeway with taglines or anything, but we always wanted to make something about being underpaid Or like, even one of the jokes was like about fighting to save the world only for, it was like $8.50 an hour or whatever joke was we made. But like just making it clear, like not only are they doing this against their will, but they're getting paid jack shit for it.
Yeah.
I think I've cursed twice.
You can curse all you want. I do not care. Yeah.
Awesome.
So
thank you.
Whatever you need to say. I do want to say that I was having a discussion with Hero. I was close, Hero. It was not a Toys R Us. It was a Babies R Us that it was filmed in. So I was close. You had said it came out like you wanted it. This is really kind of how you saw it being, correct?
Yeah. It's either, I always say everything is either just how I pictured it or in ways I never imagined. Bob Kurtzman did our creature design and would present us with sketches for monsters, and I'd never pictured our final monster to look the way it looks, just because my brain didn't go that way, right? But I was so overjoyed to see it, and yeah, I love the movie. I told you earlier, I feel biased when I say that, but I think it makes me feel fulfilled. I feel like we at least hopefully I hope one employer watches it, one manager or a retail employee and watches it and goes, oh man, I don't get treated the way I deserve to be treated. I don't, this working Black Friday is kind of fucked, right? It's not fair or sensible in any way. And I've gotten more than anything, and the things that really I've read a lot of positive reviews, which are exciting. But I've heard from a lot of retail workers, former and current retail workers, who watch the movie and really feel like it's doing something, right? It's saying something, and that means a lot. Just because that's who it was for. It always was. I was always so excited when it was just a script. I was so excited to send it to my friends in the store because I was like, oh God, how funny! Isn't this fun? This is a cool thing, and it's for us.
That's the beautiful thing. I mean, there are things in there that the average customer or the non-retail employee will never ever understand or get, and it'll be lost on them. But if you watch this movie and you've worked in the business, it's just, you'll just start kind of like snickering, just over a little phrase or something or whatnot, because it's so damn dead on.
Thank you. That's what I wanted. And I would leave when I was writing it. It's the best because I used to have in some of my later retail jobs, there was a team laptop that you could send emails to clients out on and whatever. And I would type the script in my email drafts and then send it to myself. And then I would get off at like 10 or 11. And so I would work from whenever I got home till 4 a.m, formatting what I had written in email drafts, right? Boss gets $1, I get a dime, right? And so, but I would leave, and any time I would leave with this email full of ideas, I would always think like, I want to make a movie for retail employees, people to watch and go like, yeah, right on. But also, I don't just want it to be a reminder of your worst days at work, because that's where the monsters always made it so fun for me. Is it's like, yeah, it's not just purely like work sucks, it's bad. And whatever, it's a little fun. We're having fun and we're getting silly with it, but also hopefully making a case for retail. So, from employees. A film standpoint, is this kind of like your favorite genre, like the horror genre, or is there other things that you want to do? I specifically love right now horror comedy. I think it's fun. Scenes like the scene. There's a scene in our movie where everyone's sitting around. I think I brought it up already. Talking in the warehouse, kind of talking about how they got a job at We Love Toys. That's my favorite scene because it's like, oh, it's kind of scary. They're all going to die, but it's funny too because they're talking about the different reasons how they ended up here, and it's personal and it's creepy and sad and whatever. And it's just fun to feel so many things watching a movie. And so. Right now, I'm loving horror comedy. That's just the space I really would like to live in. I think pursuing any script, I'm like, it's a horror. And then I just end up kind of writing silly bits or whatever, where it ends up becoming a broader horror comedy.
So what's your long-term goal?
I want to tell stories. I want to tell stories, and I also want to help others tell stories because we've all got a story. I think even if we wanted to get hyper specific, right, and just speak to aspiring screenwriters in retail, and you tell them all to write their Black Friday idea, you'd have 1,000 completely different stories, because everyone experiences it differently. Somebody might write a rom-com about Black Friday because they're like, no, I love it. It's great. It's a really kind of magical day, right? And so part one, I got a lot of ideas. I want to tell stories. I want to share my stories. I have a lot of fun writing and collaborating and, sharing what I got to say and hopefully making somewhat of an imprint on this industry at some point. But yeah, like I said, it's a really hard industry to get a first chance in. Really easy, evidently, for some people to get a second chance, but really hard to get your first shot. And so just even talking to creatives on set and talking to people afterwards, I would really love to help people get their stuff out there and get unheard voices heard. I think the movie industry and media as a whole, it's like, yeah, we're taking a step in the right direction as far as diversity on camera goes, and I want to make sure we're getting it behind the camera too, and in writing. I just think there's a lot of voices that need to be heard.
Speaking of which, so I was going to ask you, what would your advice be to somebody wanting to get in this? Because Blame Tag, who was one of our loyal team members, had sent me something, an idea he had that I think that you would enjoy. So how does he go about getting that to somebody? And I mean, it's a retail kind of based thing, not too far off from Black Friday, but different. And where does he go?
Awesome. So there's a couple different approaches and lanes. I always like to pitch the free ones first because it's free. There's a lot of great networking sites. The one I always recommend is called coverfly.com. You set up a profile. You can meet other creatives, writers, directors, producers, share your ideas, swap scripts, meet people who might be in your neighborhood, might be in your neck of the woods, right, who want to help make a story come to life. Also, it provides you insight into kind of what people are looking for, right? They'll do open writing assignments and stuff where you'll get people like industry professionals who are like, yeah, I'm looking for a single location horror movie. And so then you could reach out and say like, hey, what's up? I have this script idea. It's a retail-based horror movie, or it's a comedy movie, or it kind of matches what you're looking for. And that's free. That costs nothing. So I'm always like, go for it. Get your name up. Like and it's a really easy and concise way to collect all your. So I have a profile on there now. And it's like, and I did not create the website. I think it sounds like I did, and I'm like trying to pitch it, but it's just cool to have I've got my 6 scripts that are up there, and it's like you could read the log line, and I've had people who go like, hey, listen, I just was passing through, saw your page. Can I take a look at this one? And so it's just an easy, free way to get people to look at your stuff. The stuff that will cost a little more money, I would always set money aside when I was working retail, like to enter competitions or to do these pitch sites, right? Like a website like Virtual Pitch Fest, which helped me meet Casey. And at the time, I think it increased a little bit. I think it's like maybe $12 a pitch now. It was $10 at the time. And so you'd buy packages and you write a query. So I would just ultimately, if you have an idea that you've written and you want to sell it, write a query, write that pitch. Say, hey, here's who I am. Here's my deal. Here's the story I wrote. Here's how you can market it. And you could even say it's Black Friday meets something, right? Go ahead. It's permission to say it's similar to this, but meets that. Black Friday, we took it around saying like, well, it's Zombieland, but it meets Office Space, right? It's waiting. It's Dawn of the Dead, but it's waiting, right? It's silly, right? And so they put that equation in that query letter, and Virtual Pitch Fest lets you send your query to professionals, right? To people. I mean, I got an email today that was like, NBC Universal is on Virtual Pitch Fest looking for scripts. And so you send it and they have 5 days to respond yes or no. But same thing. It's like I've met agents, producers, managers. I met the director of my first film on that site. And they specifically state same thing, what they're looking for. So I've found people who will post something and it's like funny because it's almost kismet, right? It's like, oh my God, you are looking for the script I have. And you just reach out and then you start that correspondence. So that's another one. Script Pipeline is awesome for competitions. Coverfly has a really cool competitions feature where you could just like filter by genre. So it's meeting people, and it's easy and it's hard. Outside of the pandemic, I was going to comedy theaters all the time and meeting creatives, performers, writers. I did UCB and I did Groundlings, and that's how I would meet people to write and collaborate and just overall create. Now it's a little bit more online, but there's definitely the space to do it. And definitely people looking for it. If you've got a good idea, like that's an asset, right? People want that. People could use that. And so make yourself a commodity, put yourself out there and yeah, flaunt your idea, man.
Real quick. So the director who picked you up through this, you said he did a documentary on Steven Tyler and Aerosmith. Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
How about you get with him and pitch a documentary on retail employees?
Yeah, I will. It'll be so sad. He's like, I'm used to filming Aerosmith. No, I would love to do more work with retail employees because it's another thing. It's, and I've said this on other shows, but it's like there's something about putting on a name tag or a vest or whatever it is or an apron that people just feel like they're separated enough from you to just treat you like garbage. And it's wild. I've worked so much of it, and it never stopped amazing me how strangely, I wouldn't even say badly, how strangely you get treated as a retail employee. So that'd be a harrowing.
But that's why like stuff like your movie is important. Anything like that is one more kind of like swing at those people, and every little bit helps, whether it's comedic or horror or whatnot, any kind of medium that kind of shows it. Hey, we love you for it.
And I thank you for saying that. That means a lot. And I think, a long-term goal in my lifetime, not even I've done what I can about it, but I would love to see Black Friday, the retail holiday, end in my lifetime. I think that would be nice because it's never, to me, it has always just been great. I could look forward to a day coming up where I'm going to get treated like shit, even more than I usually do. And it's just always gotten crueler. And anytime I think like, when I worked in retail, anytime I thought like, I think it's the enthusiasm's kind of dying down this year. Of course, the company would come forth and be like, here's a new promo or a new product that's going to bring you through the door. And it just was always so, it's still to this day, that's Thanksgiving for me. Thanksgiving is.
Speaking of which, I have to say the entire scene in the stock room where he's talking about Black Friday deals. Oh, that was beautifully done, sir.
Thank you. That was, again, when we got Bruce, Casey and I were like, we could do some fun things here. And so we were just dropping retail facts. And that was just another thing. It's like we just wanted to get in that thing because that's a big part of why Black Friday happens is the consumer, right? The people are going into the store. And so it's like, if we could slide in a little thing in the movie about how you're kind of getting tricked, right? It's always you've got egg on your face after doing Black Friday shopping. Hopefully that changed one person's mind, because it is a bit of a ruse. And what you're doing is you're saving maybe $40, right? Which is great. Good for you. But in return, you're making retail employees' lives pretty difficult for the weekend. And that supply and demand, it only increases it, right? I forget. I've worked one of the brands I worked for did a Black Friday every Friday thing. For the month. And so it was like every week on Friday there was new deals. But it's the consumer responds to that. So I don't know. It's be kind. The least you could do is go into a store, remember that's a person. I always really appreciated when someone would ask me how my day was.
Yeah, it goes a long way.
And that's huge. I would do anything for the people who were like, how are you? And like genuinely kind of inquiring about my deal. And then if they were like, can you read something for me that's up on I would grab the ladder. I'd be like, that's fine. That's cool. Cause I think you just see me a bit more realistically than others.
All right. So we're right at just an hour. And I think the question that just came through is excellent because it allows you to pitch what you got going on. So Proto Rage X asks, any big projects you've got your interest in the near future that have you excited?
Nice. Yeah. That's great. Great question. Because I'm right now working on it's a slasher that's really fun. It's a tween slasher, which is funny to say out loud. It's always really fun because that sounds wrong, that you shouldn't do it. But in the same way that when I wrote Black Friday, it was a movie about the horrors of being stuck in a situation with your coworkers, right? No one that you necessarily trust, just the people you got to work with. And that was always so scary to me. And so this next one I wrote, it's about the horrors of being 12 and growing up. And so I think it's just another way. For the way I wanted to make Black Friday was same thing. I want retail workers to watch it and to feel like, oh, I'm not alone. Other people feel the way I do. And I wrote this movie about tweens, and it's very scary, but also very much about just the most awkward. It's if Big Mouth was a slasher, and I hope a kid watches it and goes, I'm not alone. I'm not. This is a really kind of nightmarish, weird time for a lot of kids, and so I got that in the pipeline. I've got a bunch of horror comedies I would really like to get off the ground, but something I've discussed at length with the people who worked on Black Friday is like, we've just, in my opinion, scratched the tip of the iceberg as far as Black Friday stories go, and it's so many different industries, and I would love to return to that world.
Well, Hero had asked earlier, I forgot to mention it, were there any plans for a sequel, quote unquote, Green Friday?
Green Friday, it's so funny. I so many people will tweet at me like, when's Cyber Monday coming? When's the sequel Cyber Monday? I always say the sequel's called Small Business Saturday. I think that would be very fun. I think anyone who's forced to go work that weekend deserves a movie. And so, yeah, I would love to hop back into it. I think it's such a miserable weekend for so many people. You could do a whole movie about EMT workers. You could do a whole, there's so many stories to tell. So I've always joked about the sequel being, if we did a sequel, doing a direct sequel or doing a completely separate story, doing the same night, show the same night, just a different
Or you could do Cyber
right?
Monday to be kind of like Scanners.
Exactly. Right. And that's the thing, is like the possibilities kind of feel endless, and you make it, I recently mentioned just like these massive Amazon distribution centers uprooting these smaller or lower income neighborhoods. You can make a whole story about that and how that affects these people. And
nice.
Yeah.
All right, Andy, I got to tell you, this has been great. Thank you so much for being on, man.
Thank you. Of course.
I thought the movie was excellent. I think it's a good time. Anybody out there who hasn't watched it, please do so. I mean, it's not lost on you being in retail. Trust me. Retail employees are going to get a whole lot more out of this than John Q. Public, but it's worth it because, like you said, it's for us. And thank him for it, because he did a damn fine job.
Thank you very much. That means
Thank you so much, Andy. Let's see. The audio of this will be up a little bit later. So probably about 30, 40 minutes, it'll actually be up, and then you can hear it on like Spotify and all that other mess, and it'll be there. Andy, if you ever have anything else coming down the pike or whatnot you want to talk about, hey, you're welcome here anytime. You just let me know.
Thank you very much.
All right, guys. Everybody have a great night, and we will see you next time.